The sky above the alien colony was always gray now. The sun's light was weak, hidden behind clouds of dust and ash that had been there for many years. The land was dry. The rivers had long turned into cracked valleys, and the air carried a smell of rust and smoke. Long ago, this world had been alive with green forests and bright oceans. Not now, it was only a shadow of what it used to be. The people of the colony moved slowly through their days, their faces tired, their bodies weak, their eyes empty. Kale stood on a high rock near the edge of the settlement, looking at the empty sky. Every night he came here, hoping to see something different, something new, but the sky never changed. Once, when he was a child, his father had told him stories about the humans, warriors from far away who had fought for worlds like theirs, who had protected the weak. But Kale had never seen a human. He had only heard the old stories told in whispers, as if speaking them too loudly would break them. The Galactic Council had promised to protect all member worlds. But when the Great War came, the enemy moved too fast, and the Council pulled its fleets back to protect only the richest and strongest worlds. Small colonies like Kale's were left to die. The enemy didn't bother to conquer them. They just destroyed what they could, poisoned the land, and left the people to starve. Ships rarely came now. Sometimes small scavenger craft passed through, but they never landed. Once in a while, Kale would see a dark enemy patrol in the sky, moving fast, watching from above, and then vanishing. The colony's machines were broken. The farms could no longer grow enough food. The people ate only once a day, and even then, it was never enough. Children cried at night from hunger. The older ones stopped crying altogether. And slowly, the colony began to believe that no help would ever come. That night, Kale sat alone on the rock. The wind was cold and carried the faint hum of old power lines that no longer worked. He looked up at the sky, wondering if the humans from the stories had ever really existed. Some said they had been destroyed in the war. Others said they had left the galaxy, tired of fighting. No one knew the truth. Kale had almost stopped caring. Then he saw it. At first, it was just one light, far away, moving slowly across the sky. But then another appeared, and another, until there were dozens. They moved in perfect lines. Like a formation, Kale leaned forward, his heart beating faster. No scavenger ship moved like that. No enemy ship came in such numbers unless they were attacking, but these ships were not heading for an attack run. They were descending, coming lower, the lights growing brighter and sharper. The ground began to tremble. The sound reached him next to deep. Powerful roar of engines, unlike anything he had ever heard. The noise rolled across the land, shaking the walls of the settlement. People came out of their homes, looking up, their eyes wide. Some gasped, some fell to their knees. Kale heard one of the elders whisper, "It cannot be, it cannot." The ships broke through the clouds, their shapes huge and dark against the gray sky. They were not like the enemy ships. These were stronger, cleaner, sharper in design. Their hulls shone with strange markings, and the light from their engines was like blue fire. Kale's chest felt tight. He didn't dare to believe. But something inside him already knew. These were not scavengers. These were not patrols. These were warships. A sudden crackle of sound came from the old communication tower in the center of the settlement. For years it had been silent. Now, through the static, calm and commanding voice spoke. "This is the human fleet," the voice said. "You are not forgotten." The words hit Kale like a lightning strike. The humans were real. They had returned. Around him, the people were crying, shouting, hugging each other. But Kale just stood frozen, his eyes locked on the massive ships above. The enemy had abandoned them. The Council had abandoned them, but the humans had come. And Kale felt something he had not felt in many years. Hope. The ships began to take formation above the colony, their massive shadows stretching across the broken streets. Kale knew, deep inside, that life was about to change forever. But he also knew this was not the end of their struggles. It was only the beginning. The humans had returned, and with them came war. And whatever was about to happen next, Kale would be there to see it. The air over the colony felt different now. It carried a heavy hum, It's a sound of engines that did not belong to this world. The human warships hung in the sky like mountains of steel. Their size, almost too large for the eye to take in each one, was shaped for war. Long armored hulls bristling with weapons. Their dark surfaces broken only by the glow of running lights and the occasional flash from a scanning sensor. Cale stood in the middle of the crowd, unable to take his eyes off them. He could see the enemy patrol ships in the far distance. Tiny black shapes turning and vanishing into the clouds. The sight made something inside him stir. For years, the enemy had flown over this colony without fear. But now, with the humans here, they were running. The old communication tower crackled again. The same calm voice from before spoke. "Remain where you are. Help is coming." The voice had a weight to it, the kind that made people listen. Around Cale, murmurs rose and fell. The people didn't know what to think. Should they cheer? Should they be afraid? The stories about humans were full of bravery, but also full of blood. A small shadow broke away from the largest ship and began to descend. It grew larger and larger, until Cale could see the shape of a shuttle, the craft's. Engines flared as it slowed. Landing in the open ground near the center of the colony, the sound was like a storm. Rattling the windows and shaking the weak walls of nearby homes, when the ramp lowered, silence fell over the crowd. A man stepped out first, tall and broad-shouldered. Wearing black armor marked with silver lines, the air around him seemed heavy with command. Behind him came two more humans in similar armor. Carrying weapons unlike any Cale had seen before, the man's eyes scanned the crowd slowly, not with distrust, but with a sharpness that saw everything. "I am Admiral Rowan of the human fleet," he said, his voice steady. "We heard your call for help." The crowd stirred, some gasping, some crying quietly. Cale realized his own heart was pounding so hard it hurt. The Admiral went on, "For years, we have been far from this galaxy's center. Preparing for the war we knew would come again, we have seen worlds fall. We have heard the cries of those left behind, and now we are here to answer." Cale felt the words strike deep. He could barely remember the day the council ships left. But he could still remember the sound, the engines roaring away into the sky and never returning. He had never expected anyone to come back. Not after all these years. A woman in the crowd called out, "Why now? Why not years ago?" The Admiral looked at her, and for the first time, his voice softened. "'Cause we were not ready," he said. "Now we are." Cale stepped forward without thinking. "What will you do to the enemy?" he asked. The Admiral's eyes met his. "We will drive them away," he said simply. "And if they return, we will be here to meet them, around them." Human soldiers began unloading supplies from the shuttle, crates of food, medical kits, parts for repairing broken machines. It had been so long since the colony had seen anything new that people stared at the supplies as if they were treasure. But Cale noticed something else. The humans did not relax. Even while helping, they kept scanning the horizon, checking the sky. He understood why when a scout came running from the edge of the settlement, shouting, "Enemy ships moving in fast." The Admiral turned without a word and spoke into his communicator. Cale could hear the sharp, clipped orders within moments. The massive ships in the sky shifted, moving into tight formation, their weapons turned outward, facing the direction of the incoming threat. The crowd began to panic. Some ran toward shelters, others froze in place. But the Admiral's voice cut through the fear. "Stay calm, stand back." The soldiers moved quickly. Taking positions at the edge of the colony, Cale felt a mix of fear and excitement. For years they had only run from the enemy. Now, for the first time, someone was standing to fight. The first enemy ships broke through the clouds sleek. Black and armed for destruction, they came in a wide arc, trying to surround the colony. Cale's stomach tightened. There were so many of them. But the human fleet didn't move back. The great ships held their ground. Then, with no warning, beams of light and streams of fire erupted from their weapons. The sky lit up with the opening volley. The enemy shields flared under the impact. But they held, for now Cale had never seen such power. Every shot from the human fleet was clean, precise. As if every target had already been calculated before. The first trigger was pulled, the enemy began to scatter.
Ow.
But the humans pressed forward. Even the smaller human fighters moved with perfect coordination. striking from angles the enemy didn't expect. The noise was deafening, the air hot with the burn of weapons fire. Cale realized his hands were clenched into fists. For the first time in his life, he was seeing the enemy forced to retreat. And it was the humans who were making it happen. The battle had only just begun, but the shadows of steel above the colony were no longer just ships. They were a promise. The humans were here to stay. And Cale knew the fight for his world had only just started. The battle in the skies above the colony slowed, but it did not stop. The enemy had pulled back. Regrouping somewhere beyond the clouds, the human fleet remained in perfect formation. Their weapons still aimed outward. It was like watching a pack of great steel predators guarding their territory. Every move was deliberate. Every ship held its place. Cale could not look away. In the center of the colony, the human shuttle still sat with its ramp open. Admiral Rowan stood at the base, his black armor reflecting the weak sunlight. He watched the horizon like a man who expected the enemy to return at any moment. His stance was calm, but unshakable. There was no fear in his eyes, only focus. Cale had never seen anyone stand like that before. The crowd gathered again, drawn to him like metal to a magnet. Some came with questions. Some just wanted to see him up close. The stories of humans had painted them as giants of war. And here in front of them was proof. Rowan's voice carried over the murmurs. "You have been left behind for too long," he said, but no longer. His words were simple. Yet each one seemed to carry weight. Cale stepped closer, his heart still pounding from the fight. The Admiral noticed him, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. It was like Rowan could see straight through him. Cale felt small but also important, as if in that single glance. Rowan had already decided Cale was worth remembering. "We were told the humans were gone," Melder said, her voice shaking. "They said you were destroyed in the Great War." Rowan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "We were not destroyed," he said. "We left." The crowd fell silent at those words. It was the kind of answer that opened more questions than it solved. The Admiral went on, "When the Council abandoned the outer colonies, we saw the truth. They would not fight for you, but we would. We left to rebuild, to grow stronger, to prepare, and now we are ready." Cale swallowed. "You came back for us first?" he asked. Rowan nodded once. "Because you were the first to call for help," he said. "And because we remember our own, around them, human soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine. Some were distributing food, others were working with alien volunteers to set up temporary power generators. Engineers in dark uniforms were examining the old colony defenses, repairing broken turrets, and activating shield nodes that had been dead for years. Cale watched in awe as one human tech repaired a plasma conduit in minutes. Something the colony's engineers had failed to fix for over a decade, but there was no time for celebration. A sharp alarm blared from the human units. Rowan's head snapped up, his expression hardening. "Report," he ordered. A soldier stepped forward. Long-range scans showed the enemy fleet regrouping. "Admiral, they'll be back within." The hour. Rowan's jaw tightened. "They'll bring more ships this time," he said. "Good." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Cale couldn't believe it. This man was not afraid of the enemy's return. He wanted it. "Get the civilians into shelter," Rowan ordered. "Deploy shield walls around the colony perimeter. Fighter wings, hold position until my signal." Soldiers moved instantly. Cale realized something when Rowan spoke. There was no hesitation. Everyone trusted his orders without question. Cale stayed close, watching as Rowan oversaw the preparations. The Admiral noticed him again. "You want to help?" he asked. Cale nodded without thinking. Rowan tossed him a small device, a communicator. "Then you're with me," the Admiral said. "Stay close and do exactly what I say." Cale felt a rush of pride and fear at the same time. For the first time in his life, someone had asked him to stand and fight. Not as a victim, but as part of something greater. The humans moved with speed and precision. Shields flared to life around the colony, forming a faint blue dome. Turrets rotated toward the horizon, their barrels glowing faintly. Fighter craft took to the sky, their engines screaming. Forming tight formations above, Kale could feel the air vibrating with the energy of so many machines working together. Rowan stepped up onto a raised platform. Activating a holodisplay, Kale could see the incoming enemy ships on it, dozens of them, larger than before, moving fast. "They want this world," Rowan said quietly, almost to himself. "And then they'll have to take it from us." Kale's communicator buzzed with short bursts of human military code, even though he didn't understand the language. He could feel the tension in every clipped message. The Admiral's voice cut through it all. "All ships, prepare for contact." The fighters spread out. The larger warships angled their heavy weapons forward. The ground forces moved into position, ready to protect the colony no matter what. The enemy fleet broke through the clouds again. This time they came in a wall of black metal, their weapons already firing, but the humans didn't flinch. Rowan raised his hand. "Now," he said. The sky exploded with light. The battle had begun again. And Kale knew this time he would not just be watching. He was part of it, and with the human commander leading them, he dared to believe they could win. The first flashes of enemy fire lit up the sky. Streaks of red and orange burned through the clouds, racing toward the human fleet. The colony shook as the shock waves rolled over the ground. Kale felt the vibrations in his chest, a deep, heavy thrum that made his heart pound even faster. The human ships answered at once. Massive railguns fired with a sound like thunder breaking the air. Energy cannons lit the clouds with bursts of blue and white. Each shot struck with precision, not wild, not desperate, but controlled. It was the difference between panic and discipline. The humans were here to win from the command platform. Admiral Rowan stood unmoving. His gaze never left the battle. He spoke into his com in short, sharp orders. "Wing 3. Cut their flank. Battleship Helios. Push forward. Hold your fire until my mark." Kale stood beside him, clutching his communicator, relaying signals as fast as he could. The enemy formation shifted. 2 massive ships broke away, moving toward the colony itself. Kale's stomach tightened. "They're coming straight for us," he said. Rowan's eyes flicked toward the approaching shapes. "Then we hold the line," he replied, on the ground. Human soldiers moved quickly. Heavy shield generators flared to life, shimmering walls of blue energy rising between the colony and the open fields. Turrets rotated, locking on to the approaching ships. The air was thick with the scent of heated metal and ozone. Kale could see alien villagers watching from behind cover. Some with fear, others with wide-eyed awe. The first enemy ship reached firing range. A blinding beam shot from its underbelly, slamming into the shield wall. The barrier rippled violently, sparks flashing where the beam struck. Kale stumbled back from the force of the impact. But the shield held. For now, Rowan's voice was steady. "Return fire." The nearest human ground cannons roared. Bolts of plasma streaked upward, striking. The enemy's forward armor, chunks of molten metal tore free, spinning into the sky. Kale had never seen an enemy ship take damage like that. Above them, the main battle raged. Human fighters darted between the larger ships, weaving through streams of enemy fire. Each move was coordinated, every maneuver planned.
Oh yeah.
The enemy tried to overwhelm them with numbers, but the humans fought. Like a single living thing, Kale could see it now. This was why the enemy feared them. The second enemy ship made its run at the colony. This time Rowan didn't wait. "All forward batteries fire," he commanded. The blast that followed shook the air like a hammer. Dozens of human weapons converged on the target. Its shields collapsed in an instant, its hull tearing apart in a burst of light. The wreckage crashed into the barren plains beyond the colony, sending a wave of dust into the air. The crowd watching from behind the shelters gasped. Some began to cheer, but Rowan didn't smile. "They'll send more," he said quietly. "They always send more." Kale felt the truth in those words. The enemy wasn't just here to destroy the colony. They wanted to break the humans, to test them, and this was only the beginning. A sudden alarm blared from the holodisplay. Kale turned to see dozens of new signals appearing on the scanner. Fresh enemy ships were entering the system, larger ones, with weapon signatures stronger than before. Rowan didn't hesitate. Signal the fleet defensive wedge formation. Draw them away from the colony. The great human warships began to move, their engines flaring bright. They shifted into a pattern that pulled the enemy away from the planet's surface. Cale realized what Rowan was doing. He was taking the fight into space to protect the people on the ground. It was risky, it was dangerous, but it was the only way to keep the colony safe. "Sir," a human officer said over the comm, "we've got wounded on the Aegis. Shields are down to 30%. Rowan's reply was instant. "Get them behind the Helios. Cover their retreat." The sound of the battle was like a storm. Now, explosions lit the sky in blinding flashes every few seconds. A ship would vanish in a burst of fire, sometimes enemy, sometimes human. Cale gripped the edge of the console. He felt small, powerless, yet part of something so much larger than himself. On the far side of the field, the enemy tried to break through the human lines again. This time, Rowan gave a new order. "Release the reserve fighters." A squadron of sleek, black and silver craft launched from the vanguard, streaking forward like arrows. They tore into the enemy flank, breaking it apart in minutes. Cale could hardly keep up with what he was seeing. The humans weren't just holding, they were winning. After what felt like hours, the enemy began to retreat, one by one. Their ships vanished into hyperspace. The battlefield grew quiet, the heavy hum of engines replacing the sound of destruction. Cale let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Rowan lowered his comm. "Stand down," he ordered, but his eyes still scanned the sky. Cale knew the Admiral was already thinking of the next battle, because this victory, as powerful as it felt, was only temporary. The humans had shown their strength. The enemy would not forget it, and they would come back, but for the first time. Cale believed they would be ready. The sun had barely risen when the human fleet began to move again. They had held the enemy back the day before. But Admiral Rowan knew that defense alone would not win this war. If they waited, the enemy would return in greater numbers, stronger and better prepared. So the humans decided to strike first. Cale stood on the command platform beside Rowan, watching the holodisplay light up with enemy positions. Scouts had mapped several small enemy outposts scattered across the system. They weren't as large as the main fleet, but they served as supply lines. If those were destroyed, the enemy's ability to regroup would be crippled. Rowan's plan was simple. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and vanish before they could call for reinforcements. "Prepare strike teams," Rowan ordered. "All fighter wings. Load for heavy assault." His voice was calm, but Cale could hear the edge beneath it. This was not just another battle. This was a message. From the launch bays of the human warships, squadrons of fighters roared into the sky. Their engines burned bright, leaving streaks of light behind them. Larger dropships followed, each carrying soldiers in black and silver armor. The sight sent a shiver down Cale's spine. These were not just soldiers. They were the blade that would cut deep into the enemy's heart. The colony's people gathered to watch the fleet depart. Some whispered prayers. Others stood in silent hope. Cale noticed children looking up with wide eyes for them. This was the first time they had ever seen someone go out to fight for them. Not run, not hide, but fight. The first target was a weapons depot orbiting a barren moon. It was heavily shielded, surrounded by automated defense turrets, but the humans didn't approach head-on. They split their forces, coming in from multiple angles at once. Cale could see it all on the display. Enemy sensors lit up in confusion. It's unsure where to fire. Now Rowan said into his comm, "On cue." The human fighters unleashed a storm of missiles and railgun fire. The depot's shields flared and then collapsed in seconds. Dropships swept in, unloading strike teams directly onto the station. Through the grainy combat feed, Cale saw human soldiers moving like shadows, clearing room after room with flawless coordination. Explosions rippled through the structure. One by one, the enemy's defense turrets went dark. Then a massive burst of light consumed the depot. When the glare faded, there was nothing left but drifting debris. The second target was a fuel convoy in deep space. 3 large tankers, escorted by half a dozen enemy frigates. Instead of attacking the frigates first, the humans went straight for the tankers. Cale realized the plan instantly destroyed the fuel, and the escort ships would be stranded. The human strike craft darted between the frigates, ignoring their fire, in less than a minute. The first tanker erupted in a chain of fireballs. The shockwaves sent the escorts spinning off course. By the time they recovered, the humans were already gone. Each strike was over in minutes, fast, brutal, and decisive. The enemy barely had time to react before the humans vanished into the void. Kale had never seen war fought like this before. It wasn't about brute strength alone, it was about control, speed, and precision. But the final target of the day was different. It was an enemy forward base hidden in the mountains of a nearby planet. Destroying it would remove a major threat to the colony. But unlike the space strikes, this one required ground combat. Rowan led the mission himself. Kale rode with him in the dropship. The hum of the engines filling the air through the narrow viewport. He could see jagged peaks covered in ice and shadow. The enemy base was built into the largest mountain, its walls bristling with gun placements. It looked impossible to breach, but Rowan didn't seem concerned. "We'll hit them from above," the admiral said. Kale didn't understand until the dropships began to climb higher, circling around to the far side of the mountain when they came over the ridge. Kale saw human fighters already strafing the enemy defenses. Turrets exploded one after another, clearing the way for the soldiers. The dropships touched down on a narrow plateau just meters from the outer wall. The soldiers moved fast, planting charges that blasted holes through the armor plating. Kale followed close behind Rohan. Heart hammering, the corridors inside were dark and cold, the air filled with the smell of metal and burning fuel. Enemy soldiers fought back fiercely, but the humans pushed forward without pause. By the time they reached the command center, the enemy's resistance had crumbled. Rowan accessed the base's main terminal and sent the command to overload its reactors. "We're done here," he said. They pulled out fast, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the first explosions tore through the mountain from the safety of the dropship. Kale looked back and saw the entire base collapse in on itself. The mountain peak shattered, sending a plume of smoke and fire into the sky. The humans had not just taken the fight to the enemy, they had crushed them. When they returned to the colony, the people erupted in cheers. For the first time in years, the enemy had been struck where it hurt. Kale felt a deep pride swelling inside him. This was no longer just survival. This was the beginning of a fight. To reclaim their future, the colony had never seen a night like this. The air was still heavy with the scent of smoke and fuel from the returning ships. But for the first time in years, that smoke was not from burning homes or ruined fields. It was the scent of victory, and it carried through every street, every broken doorway, every shadowed corner. Kale stood near the landing zone, watching as the human soldiers returned. Their armor was scorched, their weapons scratched, but their heads were held high. Behind them came crates of salvaged supplies from the enemy outposts, food, medicine, parts for rebuilding power lines. Children ran forward to see the strange technology, their eyes wide with excitement. The soldiers didn't push them away. Some even knelt down, showing them how the devices worked. It was a sight Kale never thought he would see. Admiral Rowan stepped off the lead dropship. His armor was marked from the fighting, but he moved as if the weight meant nothing. Around him, the crowd gathered. They had waited years for someone to stand between them and the darkness. And now that someone was here in the flesh, Rowan raised his voice so all could hear. "Today you stood with us," he said. "Today you saw what we can do together. This is only the beginning." The words rolled over the crowd like a wave. There was no arrogance in them, only certainty. It was the voice of someone who had made a promise and meant to keep it. Kale moved closer, feeling the weight of the moment. He could see the trust forming in the faces of his people, a trust they had not given to anyone in many years. One of the elders stepped forward, an old woman with eyes like dark stone. "You've done what the council never did," she said. "You came when no one else would." Rowan nodded once. "We don't abandon our own," he replied, "and as long as we are here, we will not stand alone again." Those words settled deep in Kale's chest. He remembered nights when he had gone to sleep, not knowing if the colony would be there in the morning. He remembered the fear of looking up at the sky, expecting enemy patrols to descend. That fear was still there, but now it was smaller. Now there was something stronger standing beside it, hope. As the night went on, the The humans didn't just rest. Their engineers moved through the streets, repairing broken water lines, restoring damaged solar arrays, and setting up portable shields to protect vital structures. Their medics treated the sick and wounded, using equipment the colony's doctors had never seen before. Everywhere Kale went, he saw the same thing: humans working alongside aliens, not as conquerors, but as allies. He found himself helping unload supply crates from a transport. A human soldier beside him grinned and said, "Not bad for a rookie." Kale laughed quietly, surprised at how easy it felt for so long. Talking. Two outsiders had been rare, dangerous even now. Here he was, side by side with people he had once thought were only legends. Later, Kale climbed to his usual rock at the edge of the settlement. But this time, when he looked at the sky, it was different. Where once there had been nothing but emptiness, now there were light-steady, watchful lights. The human fleet hovered above, a wall of steel between the colony and the darkness beyond. It was a sight that made his chest ache, not from fear, but from the strange comfort of knowing someone was out there, guarding them. Rowan found him there, stepping up quietly. "Not your first time watching the stars, I take it?" the Admiral said. Kale shook his head. "I used to wait for someone to come," he admitted. "I didn't think anyone ever would." Rowan's gaze stayed on the fleet above. "We almost didn't make it in time," he said, "but we're here now, and we're not leaving until this world is safe." The simplicity of those words carried more weight than any speech Kale had ever heard. It wasn't just a promise to him, it was a promise to every soul in the colony, and he believed it. The next morning, the colony began to change. Work crews formed, mixing humans and aliens. Farms that had been abandoned were cleared. Irrigation lines were repaired. Shields were set up around the outer perimeter, turning the settlement from a vulnerable target into a fortified stronghold. Everywhere there was motion. Everywhere there was life. Kale found himself in the middle of it all. Rowan had given him a role as a runner between the human command post and the colony leaders. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Every message carried was a small piece of the larger fight, and Kale wanted to be part of that fight that night. The humans held a small gathering in the open square. They shared food with the colony, real food. It's not the thin rations they had lived on for years. For the first time in a long time there was laughter. It was quiet at first, hesitant, but it grew. Even Rowan, usually so serious, allowed a faint smile as he watched his soldiers and the colonists speak together like old friends. When Kale went to sleep that night, he realized something important. This was more than survival now. This was rebuilding, and the humans had not just brought weapons, they had brought the promise of a future. A future Kale intended to fight for. Morning came quietly over the colony. The first time in years, the sky was clear, the thick clouds pushed away by winds that carried no smell of smoke. Golden light spilled over the rooftops and across the dusty streets. It felt like a different world, and in many ways it was. Kale walked through the settlement, carrying a small crate of supplies from the human command post. Everywhere he looked, there was change. Shields hummed softly at the edge of town, their blue glow faint in the morning light. Farms were already being worked. The soil turned over by alien farmers and human engineers together. Children ran between buildings, laughing. Cure replaced by curiosity. Even the elders walked with straighter backs, their eyes brighter at the landing zone. Human soldiers were loading equipment onto a dropship. Some would remain here to protect the colony, but others were preparing to leave. The fleet had other worlds to help, other forgotten colonies waiting for rescue. Kale felt a pang of worry at the thought of them leaving. But then he remembered Rowan's words: they would not abandon this world. Not now, not ever. Admiral Rowan stood near the dropship ramp, speaking with the colony leaders. His voice was calm, steady, the same as it had been on the day they arrived. He was explaining defense plans, supply schedules, and the chain of communication for emergencies. It was clear this was not just a victory. This was the start of a permanent alliance. When Rowan saw Kale, he gave a small nod. "You're up early," the Admiral said. Kale shrugged. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Too much to think about." Rowan's gaze shifted to the horizon. There will always be more to think about, he said. But that's how it should be. The dropship crews finished their preparations. Engines rumbled, sending ripples through the dust at their feet. Cale realized that this was his choice now. He could stay here and help rebuild his home. Or he could take a step into the larger fight. He had never left this planet, but now, with the humans here, the galaxy no longer felt impossibly far away. "Come with us," Rowan said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. Cale froze. "Me?" Rowan nodded. "You've got the courage for it," he said. "And we need people who remember what's at stake." The offer hit Cale like a shock. He looked back toward the settlement. He saw his people working, smiling, moving with a confidence they hadn't had in years. They would be safe now, safe enough for him to go. "I'll go," Cale said, his voice firm. Rowan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good," he replied. "You'll see what else is out there, and you'll help make sure what happened here never happens again." Cale boarded the dropship, feeling the cool metal floor beneath his boots. From the viewport, he could see the colony growing smaller as they lifted off. For a moment, his chest ached, but then the sight of the human fleet filled his vision, colossal. Ships holding position above the world like guardians of steel. They weren't just war machines. They were a promise made real. The dropship docked with the Vanguard, the flagship of the human fleet. Inside, Cale walked through vast corridors. Filled with activity, soldiers, engineers, medics all moving with purpose. The air buzzed with quiet determination. It felt alive, like the heartbeat of something greater than any one person. Rowan led him to the observation deck. Through the wide glass, Cale saw the planet below. A small blue and brown sphere turning. Slowly in the void, beyond it, the stars stretched out in endless patterns. Somewhere out there were other worlds still waiting, still hoping for a light to appear in their skies. "This is just one fight," Rowan said, his voice low. "There are more coming." Cale nodded slowly. "I'm ready," he said, and he meant it, moments later. Orders came through the fleet. Coordinates for their next mission lit up on the main display. Without hesitation, the great ships began to move. Engines flared, and the fleet slipped forward into the black. The colony below faded from view, but Cale knew it was safe. And he knew he would return one day, not as a survivor, but as someone who would help make others safe too. Hours passed as the fleet traveled. Cale sat in the crew lounge listening to the quiet hum of the ship. Some of the soldiers shared stories of past battles. Others simply rested, knowing more work lay ahead. Cale realized he was now part of this life, a life where danger was certain, but so was purpose. When the fleet finally emerged from hyperspace, Cale saw another world ahead. It was dark, scarred, and silent. He recognized the look of a place that had been left behind, but this time he was not watching helplessly from the ground. He was part of the fleet that had come to change that. The sight filled him with a strange pride. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving the humans were stronger. It was about making sure no one else had to live the way his people had lived. The way he had lived. Back on the bridge, Rowan's voice carried through the "This is the human fleet." He said, "You are not forgotten." The words sent a shiver down Cale's spine, because now he was one of the voices behind that promise, and the galaxy was about to know it.